I think we can start now. So I will use this opportunity to welcome everybody to the day two of the National Conference of the Nigerian Association of Social Workers with the second and third with the second and third presentation that we are going to be having today. But first of all, I have to tender a sincere apology to our viewers for the little network issues that we had yesterday. I think we have a better network today and we can have a smooth discussion. So my name is Mr. Olo Shebolaton Lanre. I'm a social worker with the Lagos State Government and I'm the state auditor for Nigerian Association of Social Workers in Lagos State. Thank you so much. So before we start, I will have to play the national anthem for us as a form of introduction, both the first and the second stanza, so that we can.
Oh God of creation, direct our noble cause, guide our lead us right, help our youth the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow, and live in just and truth. Great love to hearts attain, to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign. Arise, O compatriot, Nigeria, call away to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and mind, one nation founded, freedom, peace and unity, peace and unity.
Thank you so much, everyone. So yesterday, a brief lowdown of what happened yesterday. We have Dr. Plank from University of Jos that spoke to us about COVID-19 and the elderly and the care of elderly by social workers. She made us to understand the challenges that the elderly have in the society generally, even before COVID-19, and which involve the issue of poverty, the issue of care, the issue of housing, and a lot of issues that they have, and the need for social workers to ensure the care of the elderly, both through direct practice and through policy advocacy, in order to ensure that policies are geared towards the care of the elderly by the Nigerian society. So which is very important for us. But as much as possible, we should try as much as possible to work very hard and ensure the care of the elderly and social workers, which is very, very important, because at that stage of being an elderly, they are a vulnerable group that we are meant as social workers to care for, which is very important. So for today, we are going to have our first presentation from Mrs. Titi Tade. She's a social, so I'm going to be reading a brief citation to us. So brief citation of Ms. Titi Tade. Ms. Titi Tade is a trained clinical psychologist and practicing medical social worker with over 20 years experience in the areas of mental health, pediatrics, disability, assisted fertility, and reproductive health. She is the Deputy Director, Medical Social Services at the Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, LUTH, Idiaraba, and lectures in various LUTH schools, the College of Medicine, and the Department of Social Work, both of the University of Lagos. A seasoned trainer and facilitator, she is a fellow of the Leadership in Environment and Development International, LEAD, and has facilitated and trained in the areas of leadership and sustainability in countries including Italy, South Africa, Uganda, Canada, and Senegal. She has a strong background in mental health and is a training coordinator for the Suicide Research and Prevention Initiative, SOPIN, where she has organized training and conferences around mental health, suicide prevention, resilience building, and media involvement in mental health awareness. Titi Tade is a pioneer HIV hotline counselor stroke trainer, TOT, training of trainers for the first HIV/AIDS hotline in Nigeria, and routinely supports developmental programs funded by non-governmental organizations. Ms. Titi is a member of LUTH Research and Ethics Committee. She is an avid reader, a foodie who loves to travel. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Mrs. Titi Tade to present our topics for today, which is myths and facts of mental health and the involvement of social workers. Ms. Tade, you are welcome on board now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank NASoW for inviting me for the conference. I'd also like to thank everybody who's present today. We have over 100 people at the conference. It's fantastic, and a huge welcome. Congratulations to NASoW for paving this innovative way of doing things, especially with 2020 as we move forward into a new era of things for everybody. So once again, I'd like to say thank you very much. I'm going to be talking about myths and facts about mental health today. And give me a minute as I share my screen. Okay. All right. Can we all see the screen?
Yes, we can see, ma'am.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So myths and facts about mental health, social workers' involvement. We'll first define what health is. Now, we all know what the definition of health by WHO is. It says it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And what that means is that somebody being healthy is not just the issue of a physical thing. It involves the mental, it involves the social well-being, and that it doesn't matter whether the person doesn't have any illness, doesn't have any disease condition. As long as maybe the mental aspects of the person or the social environment of the person is not in shape, then the person will be regarded as unhealthy. So you can see the diagram beside that. A lot of times when we focus on a healthy individual, we all think about the body. I'm sure if I had sent out a survey and asked, what is a healthy individual? People will talk about diet, will talk about exercise, will talk about so many things, taking your medication, vitamins, but rarely would anybody talk about the healthy mind. But as we see from the definition, the healthy mind is as important as the physical health of the individual. So what is mental health? What is mental health? Mental health, as defined by WHO also, says it's a state of well-being in which everybody is able to realize his or her own full potential. And what is that potential? What does it mean? It means you can cope with your normal stresses of everyday life. You can work productively and fruitfully, and you're also able to contribute to your community. I want us to note that nowhere does it say losing touch with reality, violence, being dirty, being homeless. The definition or being, as we say, whenever we talk about mental health, people say, somebody, they'll point to the brain. According to WHO, mental health is being able to function to the best of your ability to the best of your potential, irrespective. And it doesn't matter whether you have a disability. One of the things I tell people is that we all tend to have disabilities. I, for example, without my glasses, I can't read. I can't drive, I can't do anything. It's a form of a disability. So we all have our disability, but my glasses makes me able to function to the best of my potential. So whether anybody is born with a disability, whether you acquire the disability along the line, as long as you're able to function to the best of your potential, irrespective, and you can manage, you can cope with what is going on in your life, you're able to produce, work fruitfully, and be a productive member of your community, then you have mental health. And when I say mental health, a lot of people think mental health. How can we have mental health? Mental health is the same thing as when we say physical health. If I say your physical health is good, nobody will think twice about it. If I say mental health, people say, what do you mean? So mental health just simply means you are able to function within your environment. So what are the dimensions of mental health, of mental well-being? Your ability to be able to be healthy mentally. There are 4 dimensions. 1, your emotional resources, your cognitive resources, your social skills, the meaning and purpose. So emotional resources comprise of things like, how do you cope with the daily problems of life? What is your general mood? Are you an optimistic person? Do you have emotional intelligence? For example, I tell people that I think I'm naturally pessimistic. I always look at the glass as, this glass is half empty, not half full. Once you know the kind of person you are, once you know the kind of coping mechanisms you use, you are better able to address issues as they come your way. So what are your emotional resources? That's one aspect of mental well-being. The second thing is cognitive resources. What are your abilities to learn? Are you flexible about things? If things aren't going your way, will you throw a tantrum, or will you say, okay, things aren't going my way, how do I adjust? How do I manage? How do I bend around this situation? Flexibility is a key skill in social work, but it's also a key skill in functioning every day as a human being. And WHO says one of the most important cognitive resources, flexibility of mind, flexibility of knowledge, and flexibility of your behavior. The next thing is social skills. Social skills, how you interact with people on a daily basis, how you listen to people, how you relate to people, how you communicate to people. How do you communicate respect? Do you communicate, do you when you're talking, do you sound like you're insultive? So all those little things that we don't actually pay attention to are all dimensions of well-being. That's why people will see someone and say, this person is behaving a bit weird, because you've seen certain things about the person's behavior that is being communicated, maybe in the way the person is addressing you, in the way the person is talking to other people. And then the last thing, meaning and purpose. So, like I said, the dimensions of mental well-being, emotional resources, cognitive resources, social skills. But the most important thing, meaning and purpose. You must have meaning and purpose for your life. That means you have a vision, you have a goal, you have values, you feel a certain connectedness to your environment, not just your culture or your people, but wherever you are, you feel like I belong, I should be part of this environment, and I should be productive within this environment. So when these 4 resources are balanced, or these 4 dimensions are balanced, then you have somebody whose mental health is healthy, and the person's mental well-being is stable. But then we now talk of mental disorders. So we've talked about mental health, and like I said, most people say, hey, mental health, I don't have mental health issues. But mental health is different from a mental illness or a mental disorder. Mental health is your health, how healthy you are mentally. A mental disorder on the other side, or a mental illness, is a behavior or a mental pattern that you show consistently, and it causes significant distress to yourself or the people around you, or in fact, significant impairment. Impairment in the sense that you're not able to function every day. You're not able to go to work, you're not able to take your bath, you're not able to eat, you're not able to communicate with people around you. There's some levels of isolation from society. Now, these patterns of behavior are usually not culturally appropriate. So when we say culturally appropriate, so if you go to the West, the Western world, for example, people suntan a lot. So they go to the beach, they go into their swimsuits, shorts, bikinis, and they lay down on the beach and just take in the sun, and they tan, they get dark. That is culturally appropriate in the West. In Nigeria, if you have someone who comes to your neighborhood and the person just strips off all his clothes, is in his underwear, and the person lies down and say, I'm sunbathing, everybody would say there's something wrong, because we realize that it is not culturally appropriate in our environment. Even in Africa, it's not culturally appropriate everywhere, but in certain places might be. Maybe in places like Kenya, South Africa, where there's a large amount of Caucasian population that are Africans, maybe. But where there's predominantly Black people, you will find out that those kind of behavior is not culturally appropriate. So the pattern of behavior that is being exhibited by the person that has this disorder or illness is not culturally appropriate. And what it means that usually when you see this, there's a sign of dysfunction in the person. So when we say a sign of dysfunction, there's something going on mentally within the person. My colleague will tell me, she'll say, when somebody has malaria, the brain will interpret and say your body is hot. There's something wrong with you. But when the brain is ill, what interprets the brain that the brain is ill? So once you start seeing those behaviors, odd behaviors being manifested, then you know that there's some level of dysfunction going on in the brain. Now, it's important to note that mental illness can be very debilitating. It can cause total loss of function, inability to go to work, personal grooming can be very poor. But most individuals, I'm sure over 50 to 60% of individuals with mental illness can function every day, and they function appropriately in their workplaces, with their interactions with everybody. And unless they have an episode, you probably not know they have a mental health disorder. You probably not know that there's anything wrong. So it is important to realize that most people with mental illness can function and do function in their every environment. So why are we talking about mental health? We're talking about mental health because everyone has mental health. We all have mental health. The way we have physical health is the way we all have mental health. Mental illness is a very common disorder across the world, even here in Nigeria, and is a leading cause of disability globally in terms of what we call daily disability adjusted life years. So what disability life adjusted life years looks at is, when we talk about disability here, we're looking at activities of daily living. How is the person interacting with other people? The person's communication skills. And then how does the person function? Is the person able to earn a living, function at work, go out and just provide for himself or herself or the family? So what usually happens is that for people that suffer some levels of mental disorders, for example, depression, it can incapacitate them to the point where they're not able to interact. They're not able to go out and look for work. They're not able to do anything. So what happens is that over the years, a formula has been developed to determine how much of our lives, or how much of people's lives across the world is spent not being able to function because of illnesses. And the reality is, mental health is the leading cause of disability across the world. It's not cardiac issues, it's not malaria, it's not HIV, it's not cancer, it is mental health issues. Mental health places burdens on the individual, the family, and society, but it can be treated. There's no cure for mental health, but it can be treated. I tell people that there's no cure for hypertension, it's treatable. There's no cure for diabetes, it's treatable. The same way there's no cure for mental illness, but it is treatable. But because of the stigma, a lot of times people will not look for assistance, people will shy away from getting help, or family members will hide the person away from the environment. And as social workers, stigma is such a huge issue for us, because that is one of the forms of inequity in our environment. And we know that one of our tenets as social workers is to ensure that there's equity, social equity. So it's very, very important for us. So what are the causes of mental illness? So we have scientific causes, and I will talk about scientific causes as well as talking about anecdotal causes or cultural or religious beliefs. So under scientific causes, we have biological causes. It might be some sort of hormonal, it might be something hormonal, it might be neurotransmitters that are having issues, it might be some sort of neurological pathway issues that are, or degenerative neurological issues that are causing the illness. You have psychological causes as well. You have psychological causes as well, which is also an internal issue. I'm sorry, I can hear some feedback. Okay, all right, thank you. So you have psychological causes as well, which can be internal. Psychological causes may refer to things like anxiety, may refer to things like phobias, in excessive fear, irrational fear, phobias. So there's psychological causes as well. But we also have social and environmental causes, which are external factors. And these are very important for us as social workers. We'll touch on all of that. But what are the anecdotal or cultural and religious views about mental illness? One, most of the time in Africa, we think, or in Nigeria, we think a mental illness is a cause of an affliction, which is external. It is inherited. So when we say inherited, now, if we go back to biological causes, we know that mental illness, there are genetic factors involved, meaning that there are genes that have been identified that can make somebody more probable of developing mental illness than others, but it doesn't mean the person will develop it. With our cultural and religious view, we believe that once somebody in a family has mental illness, then somebody else in the family must have mental illness. It will be passed on to the children of the next generation. So they believe that, oh, it's inherited from one family member. Now, sometimes we also believe that it's consequences of bad behavior, that somebody has committed an offense or a crime against the gods, against the environment, against the town, and he'll be punished for such misdemeanors, and that he'll now be afflicted with mental illness. Also, we believe in people being bewitched, which is external as well, that people are cursed. Well, apart from a curse, you might have a curse because maybe you've done something, but somebody who's bewitched might be a case of the person came across something he wasn't supposed to do or something, and the person got afflicted with mental illness. The reasons I'm marking it internal and external, you can see that on the scientific, most of it is internal with some external factors. But for us, culturally and religious, most of it we believe is external. We believe that mental illness that is something that comes from outside is not inherent in us. Even the inherited mental illness that we talk about, usually we'll say, oh, somebody in the family was cursed and that's why it's now in the family. Now, this is the origins for the causes of mental illness is important for us because it also affects the treatment options. For scientific approaches, people will tell you that because we know it's internal, because we know there's treatment, focus on medical interventions. You do medical interventions, you do talk therapy like psychotherapy, you get your drugs, you see a psychiatrist, you see your psychologist, you see a psychiatric social worker, or social worker, a mental health social worker. But traditional and religious believe that you seek spiritual solutions. So we go from one mountain top to the other. We're drinking one solution or the other, one spiritualist or the other, because we believe it's external. So we're constantly looking for people outside to resolve the issues for us, not an internal issue. So myths. And that leads us to myth. What is a myth? A myth is, as defined by Oxford Dictionary, is a traditional story that is within a community and is one that is especially concerns the early history of a people, and it explains natural or social phenomena within that environment and typically involving supernatural beings or events. Secondly, they say it's a widely held but false belief or idea. Now, it's important to realize that they say a traditional story, meaning that it's a story that was, that said it focused on the early history of a people. But along the line, it now starts talking about spiritual, supernatural events, things that are added onto it. And we also note that it's a widely held belief, but most of the time it is false. Merriam-Webster says that the difference between Merriam-Webster says that it unfolds part of the worldview of a people or explain a practice, belief, or a natural phenomenon, meaning that a myth shows how the culture of the people of a certain environment or a certain society, how they view certain phenomena. So what happens is when you tell a story in our environment, and you talk about how mental health is an affliction, is a curse, it shows the view of us as a people, how we view mental illness, that we view mental illness not as an illness, like a physical illness, but like I said, like an affliction that cannot be treated scientifically, but involves a lot of spiritual going going on. So because of our beliefs about mental illness, this is a stereotypical representation of people with mental disorders in Nigeria. Someone who is dirty, somebody who is vagrant, homeless on the streets, somebody who is afflicted. You can see the third picture, the family is crying because the man has been afflicted with quote unquote madness. With in mental, we don't like using the word madness so much. So quote unquote mental illness. You can see the man on the street in rags, tattered. When we talk about mental illness, this is the first thing that people think about in Africa. And I will ask anybody to to counter that. But I know that this is, unless you have a background, maybe you've come across it, but this is what the average Nigerian thinks about. So let's talk about myths. What are the myths? I would love if people can share their myths in the comment box. If you have any myths about mental illness from your particular area, please, I'd love you to share it in the comment box. I'm sure Mr. Lowe, the moderator, will be able to help us read one or two out. So I'm going to mention a few myths here. Mental illness is a sign of weakness or laziness. Some people believe that for a mentally ill person who is not strong, if he's strong, he should be able to ward off spiritual attack, which is the second myth, that mental illness is a spiritual attack. The third myth, which is very important, mental illness cannot affect children. The reality is it does affect children, but we'll see that in some of our facts. Myth 4, you can catch, quote unquote, catch mental illness when you're bitten by someone who's mentally ill. For those of us that are Yoruba on the platform, I'm sure you'd have heard it so much, and I'm sure there are variations of it in other language. That don't let them bite you. They bite you, you'll become afflicted with mental illness. The fifth myth is suicide occurs mostly amongst educated people, or those people that are from the overs abroad. That suicide is it's also is regarded as a mental health disorder. So suicide is seen as, it doesn't happen in our community. But in the last few years, we've seen that suicide occurs in our community. Suicide is well and alive in our community, but we're not talking about it. But social media has made it more accessible to everyone. So we're seeing it more, but something we don't talk about. So the myth is, suicide amongst only educated people, the poor person does not have time, is too focused on what is trying to get his daily bread to be suicidal, or it's only people that live in the abroad that are suicidal. The sixth myth is that they cannot be treated. Mental disorders never get better. Like I said, I already mentioned, mental illness does not have a cure, but it can be treated. It does get better. The same way hypertension and diabetes do not have cures, but people get better if they're treated and they stay on their medication. Mental illness is mostly caused by addiction. So there's a lot of belief that it's people that take cannabis, opioids, and stuff like that that will develop mental illness. The reality is, if that is true, what that would mean is if we stop importing, if we stop the importation of drugs all over the world, and our people don't take drugs, then there won't be any mental illness in the country. But we all know that's a fallacy, because even before the advent of cannabis, drugs in our society, mental illness is historical. We have it written in a lot of our history. We have it written in some of our books from our foremost playwrights across the country. Mental illness is something that is there. Even talking about playwrights, like one of my professors will say, for those of us that know who Shango is a Yoruba mythological god. Shango committed suicide. Shango killed himself at the end of his life. So suicide, mental illness, these things have been with us for years. We may not talk about it that much, which is why we develop stories that become larger than life around a lot of this, because it's something we tend to shy away from. I don't know whether anybody has shared one or two myths in the chat room. So if they have, Mr. Olu, if you want to share right now.
Yes, now a lot of people have really shared a lot on the chat room.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of it was that mental illness is the disease of the rich.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Then Then another one said mental illness is a demonic possession.
Yes, spiritual attack. We see that all
Yes,
the
it's a
time.
spiritual attack. Yeah.
Mhm.
Then another person, Blessing Igbami, said you can use broom to drive out mental health.
Oh, thank you very
Yeah.
much. Yes, that is such. Thank you so much, Mr. Blessing or Miss Blessing, for that. I must add that to my slides. You know,
Yeah.
flogging, because of that, we tend to flog people that tend to have mental illness in our environment a lot. You will see a lot of scars on
Yeah.
their bodies. Okay.
So Professor Badru also said that the professionals who work in mental health facility can get mental illness and many more.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Prof. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
Yes,
you.
professionals that work in mental health areas, we are stigmatized people think, those people, they themselves, they're like their patients, they're not well. So thank you very much.
So
So
another very important one said from Thank God Ubani, he said only people who are mad go to psychiatric hospital.
uh, thank you so much for that. Fantastic. I have to use some of these things for my side. Only people who are
So we
mad go to
have many
psychiatric
more.
hospital.
I believe you can continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Olu. I will, so some of the things that we've mentioned here, I will touch as we go forward. Thank you. So let's look at some facts about mental illness. And I'm going to start with global facts, and then we'll go to local facts. The reality is 1 in 10 people have a mental health disorder. That's over 800 million people across the world. So I tell people that if 1 in 10 people, that means 1 in 10, every 10 people you meet in the world, one person would have a mental health disorder. That's about 10.7%. So is it that nearly 1 billion people have been afflicted or caused by the other 6 or 7 billion people in the world? I don't know. The two most common mental disorders are depression and anxiety disorders. A lot of times, like I said, when we think of mental health illness, we think about those people on the road. That is an extreme. That is an extreme of people who have been left untreated. They were not when they say having manifesting symptoms, were left untreated, were not addressed. That is an extreme, and it's quite rare. What you have is on a spectrum of people that have things like I said, depression and anxiety disorders. Those are the two most common forms of mental disorders across the world. Over 322 million people have depression globally, and it has also been found in children and adolescents below the age of 15 years. I'm sure, like I mentioned, that I work with Suicide Research and Prevention Initiative. We have a hotline. We have some hotlines. The call, a suicidal call that we've gotten, the youngest age for a suicidal call that we've gotten was, I think, 12 or 10 years old. The person was about 10 or 12 years old. And the youngest person we've seen who was suicidal was 8 years old. And I know that a lot of people will like, what is an 8-year-old thinking about? But the reality is, for each person, experiences differ. So how one person, and I talk about emotional resources earlier on, social skills, coping skills. What are the coping skills of each of the different people? So the 8-year-old that is suicidal may not have the coping skills to deal with certain things that are going on around that person. It might be bullying, it might be family dynamics, it might be so many things going on around that person. And that's why the child is suicidal. But if we think that children cannot have mental illness, then we will leave out a segment of children who will say, oh, they don't have any problem. And then as they develop, you can see that the mental health issues just sort of become bigger. Now, over 264 million people have anxiety disorders. The reason why these numbers should interest us is that that's more than the population of Nigeria. Over 264 million, over 322 million have anxiety disorders globally. People with anxiety disorders, they have panic attacks, are unable to sleep. They worry about things all the time. Like my colleague was saying, that means all of us at some point in time will experience some level of mental disorder if all of these are symptoms of mental illness. Now, over 800,000 people globally take their lives by suicide. That means for every person that takes their life, there's a death happens every 40 seconds. We've been sitting here for about 15 minutes. Every 40 seconds that we've been sitting here, somebody has taken their life across the globe. And over 78% of these deaths occur in low and middle income countries. That means over 600,000 of those deaths occur in low and middle income countries like Nigeria. Nigeria is classified as a low and middle income country. 35 million people are estimated to suffer from drug addiction. So we're not even talking about the number of people that are taking drugs, but 35 million people have what we call full drug addiction. And there's so many other people on the spectrum of becoming addicted, who are becoming dependent, and who are their tolerance levels are increasing, becoming dependent, and they become full addicts. So facts about mental illness, Africa and Nigeria. Depression is the second leading cause of disability in Africa. I remember I talked about the DALI the other time. Depression is the second leading cause of disability in Africa. African women have the highest rates of depression compared to other regions. In fact, when I was doing the research, I found out that I always thought that it was compared to other females across the world. I think African women probably have the highest rates of depression globally across male females. And it's something that we need to be worried about. What is it that is causing African women generally to have high rates of depression in our country and our continent? 3.9% of Nigeria suffer from depression. That's 7 million people. 7 million people in Nigeria today have depression. And we realize that our statistics are not accurate because people will not come forward. Some people will not get treatment. These are just the people that we know that are getting treatment or have access some form of care or the other. Quite a number will not access those kind of care. Now, 1 in 7 drug users are dependent in Nigeria. So for every 7 drug user you come across, 1 person is dependent. And when we talk about drugs, it's the whole gamut of from illegal to legal. So we're talking about things like cannabis, opiates, like I've mentioned, to alcohol, to all these other things. And then you have 1 in 4 of drug users. Out of every 4 drug users, 1 is a woman. Now, it takes me back to a myth. One of the myths we believe in Africa is that, or in Nigeria, women, quote unquote, do not do drugs. Women do not take cannabis, do not take alcohol. But studies have shown, and these studies are 2018, 2019, have shown that for every drug user that you come across, 1 is a woman. That's 25% of drug users, women. So this diagram just shows us, and it's just to emphasize what I was talking about, mental health disorders being the second most, the leading cause of disability across the world. You can see that we have all sorts of disorders around here. We have respiratory diseases like even COVID that we're talking about, but I'm sure this year COVID will probably make it the top respiratory diseases, the number 1 disability issue in the world. So non-communicable diseases like hypertension, diabetes, 7%, cardiovascular issues, heart attacks, cardiomyopathy, all sorts of cardiovascular issues, 22%, cancer, 11%. But look at neuropsychiatric disorders, 28%. Neuropsychiatric disorders take about 30% of global illnesses across the world. And under that, you have things like bipolar affective disorder, unipolar affective disorder. Those terminologies have changed. But basically what we're talking about is, we're talking about depression. We're talking about people who have, who swing between depression and mania. We're talking about dementia, especially amongst the elderly. I'm sorry I missed the lecture yesterday, but I'm sure it would have been mentioned yesterday. One of the issues with the elderly, dementia. So we have dementia, substance use and alcohol abuse, other mental disorders, and then things like epilepsies and other neurological disorders like ALS, like Parkinson's, and all those kind of things. So they make up 28, nearly 30% of all illnesses across the world. And that is why mental illnesses, mental disorders are the highest, they cause the most disability in the world. So I showed you a picture earlier of what we typically think of mental health, mental illness. But this picture represents what actually is mental illness. We're talking about anxiety, excessive fear, depression, stress. The person is scared, there's high emotions, nervousness, the person is panicking, there's antisocial behavior, the person might be having headaches all the time, inability to sleep, the person is sleeping 2-3 hours a night, not able to sleep. All those things are early signs and symptoms that there's something going on. And I'm sure if we're truthful, all of us at any point in time have gone through this. We may have better coping techniques than other people. We may have other ways we're helping to resolve some of these issues, but for some, they don't. And maybe because they have some sort of genetic predisposition, it sort of tips them over into the illness. So typically, when we're talking about mental illness, this is what we should be thinking about. not the people on the road, not the person that is with violent, that is homeless, but this everyday individuals around us and like us. Now, I want to quickly talk about social determinants of health, social determinants of mental health, rather. So social determinants of mental health are things that determine how healthy you would be, physically or mentally, as you grow up. And they're things that affect you in your everyday life as you grow up, as you function in your everyday. So there's some social determinants that act as risk factors. There's some that act as protective factors. So the risk factors are things like adverse life events and experience. Adverse life events like what has happened this year. We talk about the NSAS protests and the fallout from the NSAS protests. We talk about COVID-19 and how it has put a lot of people into economic distress. We talk about loss of a loved one, diagnosis of a terminal illness or a very serious illness. Somebody was talking about a 16 or 17-year-old that was diagnosed with diabetes, and we're seeing younger and younger children diagnosed with those kind of illnesses. Social isolation and exclusion. Some people are excluded because of who they are, and I talked about stigma earlier. They're excluded because of who they are, what they are. All these things are social determinants of the fact that people may develop mental health issues. Poverty is a leading cause of, is one of the leading social causes of people developing mental illness. So contrary to what that person said, the myth, there is only rich people that develop mental health issues. Poverty is a huge determinant. Educational attainment, people who are able to go to school, able to function, who get higher educational attainment, are able to access better health care or know where to seek for help. People with lower educational attainment may not have the economic power to seek adequate help, even when they know what to do, or they don't have information about what to do. Employment status is linked to poverty. Environmental factors like pollution. We don't take pollution seriously in Nigeria particularly, but environmental pollution has been seen to be a risk factor for people developing mental health issues. Poor housing, homelessness, if you are living in a very poor environment, is high. And unhealthy lifestyle, excessive drinking, not eating appropriately, and then poor access to healthcare. All these things are risk factors for people developing poor mental health. But what are protective factors? And that is where it's important for us as social workers. What are the protective factors? Protective factors are like secret weapons for helping people with mental health issues. Social capital. What do we mean by social capital? Your network, your social networks, your social support system and the resources you have. For children, is their parental monitoring and support. Parental monitoring, if the child has adequate care from home, is getting adequate support from the parent, the child is more likely to develop better mental health than children that don't. People that have supportive networks, you have family, you have friends, classmates, colleagues, they tend to do better than people that don't have all of this. Socioeconomic conditions, people who earn an income. So, and when I say earn an income, I'm not talking about millionaires. As long as you earn an income and there's some level of stability, not excess, level of stability, you are able to say, okay, I'm getting a salary next month. You're financially stable. Then you most likely will have better health, mental health than somebody who's not financially secure, because your stability, the financial stability gives you financial security. Environments where there's absence of discrimination and stigma, we go back to the issue of stigma. When you're in an environment where you know that you will not be discriminated against because of the color of your skin, because of the way you speak, because of who you are as a person, you feel safer, you feel less victimized as an individual. Like a colleague was telling me about how she was in a European country, and the host that was taking them out there were going to be 3 Black people in a car, and they were traveling from one end of the European country to the other. And they said, oh, you have to take your passports, you have to take your passports. And they were like, oh, why? They said, 3 Black people in a car? Oh no, they will stop us. And she was like, I can't live in this country because of the fact that of my skin, they would just stop me randomly and be searching me. She was like, I can't live in this country. That this discrimination is too much. So just the fact that you're in an environment that you feel secure protects your mental health. Social justice and equity, where social workers, I don't need to explain this to us, what it means. When there's equity, when there's justice, people feel safer. And access to faith groups. Studies have shown that people who are religious, have access to faith groups, have better mental health. And when I say faith groups, I'm not talking about Islam or Christianity. I'm talking about people who have some form of religion. So it might even be traditional worship. The fact is the traditional worship means you believe in a higher power. You have a community that you can turn to, or a network that is supportive you go to. So it's not just, a Muslim or Christian. Everybody that has some level of faith in whatever, it protects them from developing mental illness. So, social workers, what is the role of the social worker? As social workers, we have a unique role to play in the area of mental health. We're part of the mental health team. So the mental health team obviously is made of psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, occupational therapists, different professionals. But we are in a unique role because we know our clients. We develop long-lasting relationship with our clients. The level of assessments we do help us to understand the clients better, understand their social environment, understand how they interact with the environment, and how the environment also plays a role in who they are as people. We know them. We understand our local communities. We're more accessible than other members of the team, of mental health team. So if you want to see a clinical psychologist, you want to see a psychiatrist, you usually have to book an appointment. You usually have to go into the clinic and try and find out which days of what clinic day they're available. With social workers, usually our clients have our numbers. They know how to get us. They just come knocking on the door and say, please, I want to see you. So we're easily accessible. Clinical social workers understand the balance between the social and biological aspects of mental illness. Like I've shown, there is a social aspect of mental illness, as we can see from social determinants of mental health, but there's also a biological aspect. So there's a balance, and trained mental health social workers understand that balance and understand the interplay between the two. Now, the roles of social worker, we do psychosocial assessments, which also consist of doing things like understanding person's past psychiatric history, medical or surgical history, because the medical or surgical history may also have something to do with psychiatric illness. The medication list, we all know, there's some medications that people are placed on that can make them more prone to developing psychiatric illnesses. So things like medication list, we need to find about alcohol and drug use, violence risk assessment, does the person have legal issues? Now, legal issues is interesting because usually when you see a history of legal issues, it's a flag that there is something going on. So if the person has had several issues with police, you want to find out whether there's a history of mental illness. If the person is not an area boy or something, there's some level of dysfunction going on there. We provide counseling. It could be adherence counseling. It could be about treatment options. It could be decision making. Treatment options, for example, not all mental illnesses require medication. The person may require long-term psychotherapy. So all these things are things I need to discuss with the client. We provide psychoeducation to the client and the family. We do home visits and follow-up, and this is very key. Home visits and follow-ups are very key to early detection of a relapse or a mental illness. The home visits help us also with adherence monitoring, clinical attendance. We provide therapy. It might be individual and family or group therapy. We identify clients that are in relapse. I'm sure most clinical social workers or most social workers in the hospital will at one point in time, or those that have mental health background, would have gone to a ward where they've been invited to see a patient. And while in the process of interviewing the patient, they would have flagged 1, 2, 3 symptoms. And they would be the ones to tell the managing unit. It might be orthopedic, it might be endocrine, it might be something that this patient is showing signs and symptoms of some level of mental illness. Please invite the psychiatric team. Please invite the mental health team. So a lot of times as social workers, because we've been trained and we come in contact with these patients or their relatives, we're able to flag certain symptoms. In fact, we're able to flag symptoms in family members that we tell the managing team that there's a problem going on in the family and expect this. We do a lot of crisis interventions. For example, in cases of suicide attempts, a lot of times people will call and say, oh, this person has taken this or that, what do we do? Situations of drug overdose for substance abuse patients. And finally, we provide referrals. We link patients to resources because as social workers, especially social workers, you might be in a community, you might be in a hospital, whatever, but as social workers, people come to us for help. Once we identify, we're able to say, well, this is something that requires clinical help. You need to see a doctor. Let me link you to a doctor. Let me link you to a hotline. Let me link you to an NGO that provides this kind of service. You understand? So very key, referrals are our role as social workers. So in conclusion, what I have said in the last few minutes is that everyone has mental health. Everyone, every single one of us has mental health. And anyone can have mental illness. The reality is there's nothing that precludes anybody from developing a mental illness. A mental illness can develop in anybody at any time, at any place. We've seen psychiatrists that have mental illness and they function. Mental illness is common. It is treatable, not curable. And social workers are indispensable in the management of mental illness. When considering the fact that social factors, we look at social determinants of health, we look at the importance of the tripartite of physical, mental, and social health as defined by WHO. So our role as social workers cannot be underscored in ensuring that people stay mentally healthy and we're able to provide a cohesive mental health treatment to our clients. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your presentation for this. We appreciate this fantastic presentation on myths and facts about mental health. I think all of us, we have learned one or two things from this presentation that we can use in our practice as social workers, as a care worker for our patients. So without much ado, I think we have to go to the question and answer section so that we can move faster. And I can assure you from our, we'll take some questions from our Zoom platform and on our YouTube platform so that we can get our YouTube viewers involved too. So some questions are already here. I don't know if you can see them, or do I need to read them to you?
I would appreciate if you can read a couple to me. Okay. There's so much coming in, yes.
Yeah, Thank you. So the first question I would love to read is from Ms. Giwa Ododoluwatoyin. She said, thanks, please, I want to know whether a child can inherit mental illness from the mother only.
So, thank you. Do you want me to answer one, or do you want to do 2, 3, and then I answer? How do you want us to do it?
I think you can answer one after the other.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, all right. Thank you, Ms. Giwa. So, a child. So, mental illness, like I said, can be genetic. There's genes that have been shown to make people more vulnerable to developing a mental illness. So, it doesn't matter whether it's from the mother or the father. The point is the child will get the child can get the genes from either the mother or the father. It's not strictly the mother. It can be either the father or the mother. If the child has the genes, if the child goes through a lot of stress, the child may develop mental illness, but the child will have the genes and may never develop mental health issues. I hope I've answered that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Then from our Facebook, YouTube viewer, from Mr. Olashubomi Oluwo, we said mental illness stroke disorder are sometimes used interchangeably. Thus, is there any difference between mental disorders and mental illness? If there is, what is the difference?
So the illness is the state in which the person is in. A disorder is maybe the collection of the symptoms or that describes the nature of the certain illness. So depression is a form of disorder. Schizophrenia is a form of disorder. You understand? So it's used interchangeably. But if you're looking at it specifically, disorder describes the collection of symptoms that make up that particular illness of depression. And then patient will say the patient has a mental illness.
Thank you so much. Another question from our Zoom platform. Yes, that's what I'm looking at. So we have the last question from Mrs. Olabisi Adebawo. Our question is that what role do you think social media can play to help people who have depression?
Social media help. Wow. So it's it's twofold. Social media can help in the sense that what we're doing here, for example, this is a form of social media. This is Zoom. You can be on. So most times when we think about social media, we think of Instagram, Twitter. There are a lot of groups on Instagram, Twitter that are like, the Facebook groups as well, where people can go and talk about, share their problems. You get support. There's some services that are being provided online by mental health experts. But social media can also be a problem because a lot of studies are showing that people spend so much time on social media these days. And you know what we call the gram life, Instagram life. There's so much fake life posted on social media that for some people, the social media itself will now become what sort of precipitates the illness for them. So social media can be positive and it can also have its negative aspects. Sorry, there was a question I noted. Somebody asked about why periodical reviews of DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual and ICD. So the reason you have periodical reviews is that studies, the more people study disease conditions, the more information you have, and the more you change the diagnostic criteria for different things. So it's not just mental illness. So COVID, for example, the diagnostic criteria for COVID has changed throughout the year. At the beginning of the year, we had 4 or 5 things for mentioning what are the symptoms of COVID. By the end of the year, we realized that those 4 or 5 things they're not just the core symptoms to look for in COVID, there are other symptoms. So the essence of ICD and DSM being reviewed is because studies are coming out, people are understanding that some of the things they thought of before isn't valid any longer or has been updated. So they update it so that across the world you have the same diagnostic criteria for everybody.
So thank you so much, Mama, for the answer, for the presentation and answer. So some people are raising up their hands from the panelists here, but I will urge them to wait until we finish with the Prof's presentation. So whatever discussion we are going to have after that, we can have an interaction with each other based on Prof's presentation and your presentation. So our next presenter is Professor James Ayoguna. Professor James Ayoguna attended University of Lagos, Ibadan, and Sierra Leone, and holds master's degrees in social work and public health, PhD, PGDE, CTC, and CTCM and H. He is a registered social worker in both UK and Nigeria. He is also a registered medical social worker. He had worked as a zonal primary health coordinator in Southwest, Edo, and Delta states with Christian Health Association of Nigeria, chain, before joining the University of Ibadan as lecturer 2 in 2005. He was promoted to the post of Professor of Social Work in October 2007. He has published widely in social work, social policy with emphasis on health and social work, both medical and psychiatric, in reputable international and national journals. He is currently the head of department. He is married with children. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my head of department of social work, University of Ibadan, Professor James Ayoguna, to present to us social work practice during critical periods, challenges and prospects. Well, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for inviting me. Let me first thank all the executive of NASoW, starting from the president, Alhaji Mustafa, and even Lagos State Chapter Chairperson, Mrs. Ogedebe, and the entire teams, both at national and state levels. Tonight, the topic given to me, social work practice during critical periods, challenges and prospects. Sometimes I wonder if social worker does any other thing different from solving problems emanating from critical periods. You are called in during disaster. You are called in when there is violence. You are called in. Sometimes I refer to social workers as undertakers. Usually when things have gone so bad, that's when they remember that, oh, go and call social worker here in Nigeria. When they find corpses on the road, call social welfare people. What is critical period? Critical periods are stressful life events that precipitate a state of crisis wherein people experience temporary feelings of severe acute distress and of being overwhelmed or unable to cope in ways that reduce the discomfort or the hazardous circumstances. So in other words, critical period arises when one is unable to cope with situation. The coping ability of each of us differs. And so when people are unable to cope, they move into stressful situation. Hell, Regel, and Mirabito affirmed that disaster or critical periods are a collective stress situation in which many members of social system fail to receive expected conditions of life, such as safety of the physical environment, protections from attack, provision of food, shelter, and income, and the guidance and information necessary to carry on normal activities. And I just wonder, can we in Nigeria today carry on normal activities? So in a way, we are in critical periods. It is not just the beginning of it. And we are not blaming anybody for it. We are just blaming the system over time. And we've been in these critical periods for a very long time. Critical periods are traumatic and catastrophic. They are really affecting people's expected life experiences, resulting in crisis, dysfunctional behavior, impaired physical and social functioning, and acute and prolonged mental disorder, just as my colleague from University of Lagos Teaching Hospital just said. So those who are even in mental health, they are in critical period. The critical period may occur in form of stressful events, and let's divide this into two subheads. Now, the first one, universal life experiences. We all go through this. These are maturational experiences. Childbirth for women, adolescents, marriage, as sweet as it is a critical period. Menopause and retirement. One may talk about retirement that, well, you've put in 35 years or whatever number of years you've put in before attaining the age of retirement. But it's a critical period because that is when people who wake up very early in the morning to go to their offices now become disenchanted, sometimes with life. They become less active, and some people are not even sure what becomes of them. We've seen a situation where somebody will get into the thank you very much.
You need to leave the video on too, so that the people on YouTube can have a feeling of being on. Thank you. Can you see your slide now, sir?
But the points are not okay. You've just started that.
Yes, sir.
And so the second one.
We can continue for where you started.
No, let's. Okay. So you will try to find out. The first one, I was talking about universal life experiences, like normal maturational experiences, like childbirth, adolescence, marriage, menopause, and retirement. And I was discussing about retirement that people may think is not a critical period, but it is in the real sense of it. The normal developmental stressful life events are accompanied by temporary feelings of severe upset in most people and can trigger a crisis. The second one is extraordinary life experiences. And these are far more likely to produce severe distress, in some cases, leading to a long-term impaired psychological, social, and physical state. These include life-threatening illness or trauma, the death of a loved one, natural and man-made disasters such as fire. Hello?
And continue, sir.
Prof, I've muted him.
Okay. Long-time impaired psychological, social, and physical state. And all these life-threatening effects happened to people day in, day out. And of course, social workers have a lot to do in this circumstance. Therefore, critical periods can cause severe emotional upset, which is accompanied by feelings of confusion, anxiety, depression, anger, and impaired social functioning and physical symptoms. What happened recently with us is an example when the youth became, they couldn't even trust anybody anymore. They jumped on the streets, and we all saw it. So critical period happens just like that. During critical periods, individuals also experience heightened psychological vulnerability, reduced defensiveness, and a severe breakdown in coping and problem-solving ability. Of course, when you are in critical period, your coping ability reduces. Everybody comes with different advice, and you get confused because your strength is weakened by this critical period. And we have these approaches. And until we understand these three approaches, these three major divisions of critical periods, the first one is psychosocial. And under psychosocial, we have family violence and abuse, crime in the community, and schools. Schools, we may not have serious problems here in Nigeria for now, as serious as it is in the US. They know they have critical period in their hands. Then we have mental illness as well. They are all under psychosocial problems. The second one is natural disasters, like earthquake, flood, tremor, drought. These are natural disasters, natural causes that may be beyond human comprehension. Then we have the biological. Epidemics of all kinds. What we have at our hand now is COVID-19, and we are struggling with it. We have poison. It could be bird flu, rinderpest, even cyanide caused by this cassava. Those who eat gari, as I am, cancer, HIV/AIDS, TB, leprosy. These are all under biological causes of critical periods. It is necessary to include poverty, unemployment, job loss, sexual assault, family and domestic violence, either within or outside. Then we have divorce, psychosis. We are back on health issue again. Retirement, family immigration, especially from a war-torn country. You become a refugee. And other causes of critical periods. We all have them in Nigeria presently. These are all social work issues, and it is a clarion call to all social workers that the problems are with us. Challenges and prospects. There's a Chinese saying in their language that presents critical periods as time of danger and opportunity. Of course, in every critical period, you still see some good, some strength emanating from such periods. We have it in Nigeria. Those who never thought they could make some progress in life, we see them making progress because of the situation. When people finish whatever course they've undertaken and no job and all that, they try to look inwards. And some of them are making headway. These are what the Chinese people refer to as opportunity in critical periods. The danger aspect describes a state of disequilibrium and vulnerability that can result from the periods and the possibility that individuals will experience long-term distress and impaired functioning. The danger of it is when we even lose hope, that we just feel this is the end of the road, and then there will be no progress. And instead of making some progress in life, you have deterioration. One keeps going down instead of moving up. So opportunity aspect describes the unexpected possibilities that exist for growth and development. When individuals discover previously unknown or underutilized resources and strengths within themselves and their support systems as a result of such critical periods. Simply put, critical periods have their challenges and prospects. Some challenges are the suddenness of critical periods. Some critical periods begin gradually until they become unbearable. We've seen a situation, well, it happened here in Lagos sometime, maybe some 4 or 5 years ago, where a couple, the woman, the wife, was managing the husband. That is the word, managing the husband. And she never revealed what was going on within their family until she was killed by the same husband she devoted her life to. The rest is story. Now, the family stress situation and reactions to community problems are affected. Critical periods lead to a state of feeling of extreme vulnerability, and usual coping mechanisms may not work in the circumstance. If we don't act quickly as social workers, the coping mechanisms in individual may not work as expected. And that was what happened with the lady I just cited as an example. The lady was working in a bank until she was killed by the husband. The most affected when we talk about critical periods are relationships. That is the first victim. And that is within the family, group, and community. Next to it is economy, education, and health. And we know what is happening to us now, presently, in Nigeria. When these are negatively affected, life becomes meaningless. This negativity is linked to the concept of social vulnerability and its impact on humanity, especially the poor groups of society. Therefore, critical periods come with disruption of societal functioning. At a human level, it destroys the common forms of survival, such as food security, health, education, and other related aspects of humanity. Now, we are carrying out a research presently amongst the IDPs, internally displaced persons. And one needs to go there to see what is happening with them. Now they can't go to their farms. We are talking about these Boko Harams and where the bandits are operating. They are totally from their natural harbors. And they are just new within their own country. So these are critical periods, and their children are not able to go to schools. Their health, if you go through, let's look at the facilities in Borno, Yobe, Adamawa, the number of schools destroyed, the number of health institutions destroyed, the number of facilities, government facilities and private facilities destroyed. So they are definitely in critical periods. One major advantage which we may accept as a prospect is that critical periods enhance resilience of individuals and communities. This we saw amongst the internally displaced persons. Resilience, they are still going on, they are still moving ahead with their lives in spite of all these problems. Very overwhelming problems, but they are still moving on with their lives. And so, generally, example of this is Nigerians and Nigeria. Nigeria is going through tough times, and we, Nigerians, are also moving with it in this tough period. In spite of the difficult times Nigeria is going through, Nigerians have become more resilient. This has also allowed the government agencies and individuals to know how different victims of critical periods may be assisted. Socio-economic development of the society is gravely affected by critical periods. And that's why the government is putting in place so many facilities, market money, farmer money, and all that to assist the very poor. Now, the role of social workers in critical periods. Generally, social work practice in critical periods demands skilled approach that is eclectic. You don't use just one method. You use several methods to deal with the problem. And that recognizes and respects other stakeholders' roles. The main goals are, now, when we invite other stakeholders to join us in dealing with this critical period, we are not making our own profession to be exclusive. We want inclusive approach to solving these critical periods problems, because no single profession can do it alone. And the era of this is my profession, no one should join me, has gone and gone for good. So the main goals are, one, to save lives and keep lives. You don't just save lives and forget about it. You have to keep lives. So in other words, you have to find ways of maintaining, sustaining those lives. The second one is reduce the number of victims of critical periods. Whatever we can do as social workers, we must endeavor to assist in reducing the numbers involved, the number of victims. And we can open their eyes to all these facilities that government is giving. As I mentioned, market money, trader money, farmer money, no matter how small the money may be, maybe that is just all they need to start a business. So we can introduce them or even find ways of registering them for such facilities. We can do that. The third one is to reduce damage to families and communities and the environment and assets. So in other words, we should do good as we are known for. We should reduce. There are some problems that that social workers may not face head-on to solve. But we can partialize such problems. We begin with those ones that are amenable to solution and move on to the tough ones. In most cases, when you start with the tough ones and you are unable to solve it, then you've lost the case. So it's better to start with those ones amenable to quick solution, quick resolution, and then we move on to bigger ones. So we reduce damage to families, communities, environment, and even assets. Critical periods do not only affect lives of individuals, families, and communities, but also affect the assets and environment. And this makes recovery hard and on hold. Now, for people who have cancer, that's one of the examples. I used to tell people that cancer will come and deal with the person, take all the assets, if you have land, you sell cars, you sell whatever. And at the end of the day, this same disease will still go for the life. So all these, we need to have it at the back of our minds that we must find ways of alleviating all these problems. Yes, if the doctors have done their job and they know that this disease is likely to take the life of that particular man or woman, it is the onus rests on us to find ways of sustaining the family even when that person is gone to rest. So these are critical periods. It is important to restate international definition of social work to guide further discussion on this topic. The definition is there, which we all know. I will expect people to still revise it because it talks about how to deal with critical periods. The definition makes it important to note that the configuration of critical periods in professional practice does not dismantle normal social work practice, but advocates holistic practice. So in other words, social workers should by all means prevent a dependency syndrome, which is common in critical periods when coping by the victims becomes difficult. We've seen a situation that long after victims have recovered from a particular critical period, they still depend on the social worker. If they want to pay school fees of their children, they will still phone social worker or ask the social worker, I want to pay my children's school fees. That is dependency syndrome. Our own is to bring them back to social functioning and then allow them to move with their lives. So let's verse the definition that will still remind us of what we are expected to do as social workers. Social workers should avoid academic combos. It's not only in higher institutions where you find academic combos. Even in practice, they still criticize each other. These are not relevant, and they are not useful in practice. And they are not even useful to social workers themselves. Academic exercise, let's find ways of helping the people. Ours is a helping profession, not trying to write international journal papers and all that. Now, there's a new approach in social work practice that we must also imbibe. Postmodernism in social work simply means valuing uniqueness that can be appreciated in clients and what they can do. And that is the complexity in social work practice, rather than judging them in comparison with others. Doing that simply means we are ranking, and we don't need all this here. So in other words, let us find ways of treating every victim of critical period as a unique person, demanding unique approach. Let us not just generalize that, well, this fellow has similar problem and I treated this fellow this way. So that same method should work on this. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. Because no two individuals are the same. Just as we have stars that are several billions in the sky, no two stars are the same. That is the way the Lord has made us. So we are unique, and that should be recognized. Therefore, social workers must compare critical periods, must not compare critical periods with one another, because no two periods are the same. Even in Boko Haram's zone, the way a village is attacked today may not be the same way another village will be attacked. Even here in Ibadan, I'm talking about Ibadan, Oyo State now. We had a case of police versus those hoodlums, and the way that happened was different from the way that happened yesterday. Just yesterday happened. They are all involving hoodlums and police, but two different scenarios. So that is the way we should treat people because of the uniqueness in them. So postmodernism illuminates ways of thinking that can provide constructive guidance for social workers. While modernism, that is the present one we are doing, is concerned with conclusions. How do I just do it and move on? But this other one is illuminating ways of thinking, giving us new approaches. What do I do to solve these problems? Because the problems too, as I used to tell some people, the problems have also research into how to affect people. So the approach our forefathers, social workers used may not work with us today, because you don't step into the same river, step in the same water. No, the first one you step into has gone away. The second step you put there is a new water entirely. This postmodern approach looks for the absent but implicit and not visible but nonetheless present. There are some salient issues that clients may not tell us. Even if some of them are dying, for those who are in medical social work, they will still not tell you what led them into that particular problem. So those are salient things that you should try to bring out, because even if it doesn't help that particular fellow, we will have it at the back of our mind that it does happen and it will help some other people in future. Therefore, postmodernism is a radical reappraisal of modern assumptions. Radical appraisal of what we used to do. We now sit down, those ones that are working, we continue with it. Those ones that are no longer effective in our treatment, we try to discard of them and then embrace new approaches. Intervention. The first undertaking by social workers involved in critical periods management is the pledge to do no harm. My people have a proverb, Osabo legbemi, shemi bo sebami. So in other words, if you serve a God that is not helping you, the best you can do is to discard that God and look for a better God. So when we are now talking about intervention, we have some steps that we are encouraged to take. The first one is to do proper assessment, assess the problems and the needs of individuals so that you know the approach that you will take. The second one is match resources to those needs. You will have identified the needs. So you now match the limited resources you may have to those needs. You prioritize. And the third one simply means you prevent further adverse effects. That is, you stem the trend. You don't allow the situation to deteriorate. And the last one is to evaluate the effectiveness of strategies and improve contingency plans for the future. In all this, we must carry the clients along so that the way we do it, the client will also learn. And if similar problem arises in future, he or she may be able to even do something himself or herself without coming to social workers. Social workers should maintain professional relationships with people, acting as their guides and advocates. They should use professional judgment to make tough decisions that might not always be well received, even by those to be helped. So there is nothing we can do about it. You try your best to give your best, but then you may still meet some roadblocks. And so you may have to take some tough decisions. We did that recently when there was a case of divorce and all that. And the woman insisted that she was going to, two scenarios now, that she was going to pack out of the house. And we looked at the situation. Yes, if your life is not threatened, is the man beating you? No. Is he feeding the children? Yes. Is he paying the rent? Yes. What is the problem? It's just some salient things that they will not tell people between them, between the husband and the wife. And we now advise the wife, if you pack out, we are not sure if this man is not having another woman just at the back of the fence. As you leave, the one at the back of the fence will just come in, and that would be it. Your coming back may not be possible anymore. And even if you eventually come back, you will be one of the two. You will no longer be the wife. You will be one of the wives. And she imbibed the advice. She stayed. They are together today. Another man, you won't believe it, highly educated, a colleague. And because somebody, a woman, was where they met, well, and he wanted that one to come in. His children, they had already graduated from the university. And you are now bringing in a new problem. I'm not saying women are problems, men are problems too, but we were able to solve that as well. So social workers, you look for salient issues, and then you make your approach to be eclectic. Don't use don't insist on a particular method. Use several methods so as to achieve results. Sometimes tough decisions will have to be taken by you as a social worker. Already, difficult personal circumstances are dealt further. Unexpected blows, a sudden death in the family, the rapid onset of illness, or, as we have tragically witnessed in recent times, loss and injury through acts of terrorism, natural disaster, institutional neglect, and we all see this. When such happens, their approach,
so better
their approach
580 is not bad. It's not bad though.
Oh, sorry, Prof.
Hello?
I'm muted here. I'm so sorry, Prof.
Hello?
Continue, sir. Continue, sir.
They should bring a unique combination of skills, knowledge, and values to solving and or managing critical periods. Social workers should give emotional and therapeutic support to the individuals in critical periods. Social workers' voice can make a significant contribution. In conclusion, critical periods may not be said to be totally negative, just as we said. Some strengths also are in, and several coping abilities are developed. Critical periods can be sudden and may gradually become chronic, just as we have terrorism, Boko Haram, kidnapping, banditry, robbery, rape. All these things, all these problems were unheard of when we were growing up. But now we see it. Banditry, rape, even rape of under one. So we all have it, and these are issues with social welfare implications.
Hello?
So in other words, they all fall back on us. Social workers should ensure that community members involved in critical periods are part of efforts being made to restore them back to social functioning. Let us not claim that we know it all and that we should be the one to restore them. We should only guide them. We should work together so that the restoration will be total. Herrero gave the goals of social work professionals in critical situations as one, provide information about the opportunities that social groups have available to them. 2, motivate people to have access to those opportunities. We've mentioned several opportunities, even from federal government, state government, and the local government, and some individuals too. So we try to motivate them and then give them information so that they can access all these opportunities. Number 3, help victims manage their feelings and emotions. Number 4, help people learn new ways to face their problems. Show them how to think about their new situation in a different way. We've seen people who will even tell you that they've lost hope, nothing will be good to them they can't make it. No, 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 no. Social workers must give hope. That's why we are social workers. Number 5, help victims recover their psychological equilibrium. Number 6, process the event with those affected so that they can move on with their lives. Number 7, establish or facilitate communication between people in crisis. Number 8, help individuals or families have a clear understanding of the situation. Number 9, restore the individual's homeostasis with their surroundings. In other words, help them adapt to their new situation. Anywhere we go now, we talk about new normal because things have really changed. What we are doing now, we will have gathered in one hall and be talking to each other. But because of COVID-19, we are now doing it in a new way. So this is a new normal conference. And I want to thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much. We had a very wonderful, informative, and educative session. Let's have our questions on the group, and Mr. Lowo will read through the other channels. I will read through the webinar. So let's have Mr. Lowo read some of the questions we have in the YouTube.
Hello, I think we can go on with the one on the webinar first.
I'm listening.
Okay, the questions we have here says that, how will you advise the, okay, that's for the other doctor. In view of the important roles expected from the social workers in not just critical periods, but in all situations, why, and particularly in Nigeria, is the profession being denied by government recognition in and inclusion in planning and problem solving? Why are the social work profession being denied by the government in inclusion, planning, and solving problems? That's from Mr. Domingo.
Do I respond?
Yes, Doc. Yes, Prof. Sorry.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy my president, Alhaji Mustafa, is listening to me, and there is a challenge to all of us. The profession is has not been, the profession here in Nigeria has not been professionalized. We don't have any law backing up our practice. Well, we may have registered the associations here and there, but there must be a bill passed by the National Assembly, signed by Mr. President, to make it a law that it will no longer be all commercial profession. And that is being worked out. I believe they are still pursuing it. We almost got there last year, but for one reason or the other, we couldn't reach there. But I believe in no distant time, the profession will be registered with the government, will be recognized as a profession. There will be a bill. It will be a property of the government and the people of Nigeria. But that is not for now. So to say they are not being invited for decision making, that may not be totally true. Because we have Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Services, Federal Ministry of Youth, They are all there and they invite the professionals there to meetings. They are occupying management positions in these ministries, and they are part of all the decisions being made that have social welfare implications. So we are being invited. It's just that we've not got to that point that we can say, okay, if you are not, you've not been certified by NASoW or by a body to be put in place by the federal government, you cannot, one, call yourself a social worker. Two, you cannot practice as an independent social worker. We've not got to that level yet, but we are working on it, and I believe we will get there.
Thank you so much, Prof. We have another question. In a situation whereby the society is not given opportunity to perform as is expected as a social worker, what should be done? If you are in a society and you're not given opportunity to perform as expected as a social worker, what should you do?
Well, I think it's still a follow-up to the previous question. If you are registered legally, you are licensed, and you are recognized as a professional, nobody will dabble into your own profession. You go to hospital, doctor is allowed to perform his or her profession. You go to hospital, nurses are allowed to do their job. But in our own situation, people who are not trained as social workers, but employed as social workers are with us. They are with us. And in my own view, I don't advocate that they should go, they should leave the profession. If they are still interested, they should be given a period that, okay, the next 3 or 4 years, if you don't have the certificate in social work,
Hello, Prof. Prof, are you still there? Okay, I think we have a bad network, and okay, we'll take the last question from the webinar. Why Mr. Lowell comes up if there's any question on the YouTube, but we also have 2 people pending from the other discussion that they raised their hand, and someone said they would like to add something to what the previous session was talking about. So I'll read this question. If Prof is still with us, it says, in a critical period, do social workers make decisions on behalf of the clients, or you allow clients make an informed decision based on resources or information available? This is from Mrs. Cinderella Oyechuka. Prof, are you still with us?
Professor Badru can take that question.
Okay, thank you so much, my president. Professor Badru, are you with us, please?
Yeah.
Okay, please, can you help us with that question?
What is
in
the
a critical
question,
period, it says, in a critical period, do social workers make decision on behalf of the clients, or you allow clients make an informed decision based on resources or information available?
I think the important point is that, we have what we call client self-determination. And in a crisis situation, the client may not have all the full information. So it is important for the social worker to guide decision-making for the client. So the position really is that the social worker should have an informed, opinion and knowledge and value system, while the client's position should be guided. So at the end of the day, it will be richer for the client if all issues at stake are considered rather than just one position. So my own take on that is very clear. I.e., in a crisis situation, a number of things may be blurred. So the social worker is an informed, is a trained, certified, certificated person who has a lot of knowledge and information, and he or she will be able to guide the decision-making of the client. That's my take. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Prof. Professor Badru, thank you so much. Okay, we have 2 hands raised up. We have the national president. Please, you can have the floor now.
Yes, distinguished colleagues, I would like to raise some fundamental issue on the the current issue of professionalization. In our ideological struggle, this struggle should be all-encompassing and all-embracing. And what I'm trying to say is that we have over 45 institutions in Nigeria offering social work courses at diploma and degree level. And I believe these institutions will be more concerned of bringing to the market commodity with NAFDAC number. And they should be in the forefront in the agenda for professionalizations, because they are bringing the social work students into in the world of market, in the labor market that is not. Are you hearing me? Are you with me? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. We can hear you, sir.
Oh,
can please go ahead.
Yeah, in our ideological struggle, the Afri-Tours, the academic community should be more analytically involved in this struggle rather than be at the back of the struggle. For quite a long time, the struggle has been ongoing. And when you look at the scenario, it has been left to the NASoW as a professional association, leading the people who have been producing the graduates of social work not participating actively. And I have said it over and over that bringing to the students or the graduates of social works or into the labor market without adequate act of parliament that you allow them to function effectively is just as good as committing a crime against humanity. Large number of our students are roaming about because the profession of social work is not backed by the act of parliament, and it has given room to quackery. People who are not supposed to be there are now there doing the work of social work without producing any result. And the concern of the academicians and the academics in the academic community should be seriously tailored towards the agitation for professionalization and towards the struggle in our National Assembly, whereby the bill could successfully pass through the remaining stages of discourse. But regrettably, they are sitting on the fence. We have not been seeing them actively involved. And to us particularly, it is not a good story to tell. It would be inappropriate for us to come to a national discourse and say we are not recognized. What efforts are the lecturers in tertiary institutions, what have they done that for them to even say, okay, these have been our contributions? To us is zero. From Lagos to Boriguri, we have not been active participation in the struggle towards the professionalization of social professions. And they are producing students into the labor market. They are producing social workers in the labor market that are not social workers without NAFDAC number, and which is making them to face a lot of difficulties and challenges after graduation. I think we should come together. The academic world, academic community should come together with Nigeria Association of Social Workers. I know they have an association of Nigeria Association of Social Work Educators, which has been dormant for quite a long time. They must rise up to their responsibilities. They must come out to say, okay, we are the manufacturers producing commodities, and these commodities must have NAFDAC number. They must be in the forefront of agitation for social work legislation. It is then, and then some of us can come on the national discourse and say we are not recognized or we are recognized. That is my first observation. And the second one on the issue of legislation or where do you take responsibility? That is from the last question. Is it the client that should take absolute responsibility when it comes to matter on issues? The advice is for the social workers. Advice for the social workers. The decision is for the client, provided is rational enough to take responsibility. So outside the element of client self-determination is there, you allow the client to take decision, provided is rational enough to take responsibility. And that is just the piece of issue.
Thank you so much, our National President, Rashid Mustafa. Thank you so much, sir. So it's our collective responsibility to get the social work bill. We have to keep talking about it until we get our desired outcome. So I will read the question we have for Professor Ayaguna. He said, to what extent can you say that the social work bill that has not been passed affects the intervention of social workers in the current critical periods in Nigeria?
Sorry?
He said, to what
Please
extent
repeat the question.
can you say? Yeah, the question says that to what extent can you say that the social work bill that has not been passed affects the intervention of social workers in the current critical period in Nigeria?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I've had my president who just talked about the happenings. And honestly, I don't want to join issues with him at all, because we've talked both in private and in public. And I do not agree with everything he said, but that's not the issue. I don't want to join issues with him. Now, the bill does not say we shouldn't practice social work. I mean, lack of bill. Hello? Hello?
I am with you, sir. We are with you, sir.
Yeah. I said lack of law backing us up does not prevent us from doing the best we can as social workers. We will continue to do the best we can as social workers. And if we keep within the law, within the Nigerian law generally, the practice law and other laws, we will not run into stormy waters, even without the bill. Because I do know that those who have practiced over time, they did the best they could in the circumstance. And I do know that this issue of bill started from Lokoja in 1978. So if we started something since 1978 and we are still where we are, then something is wrong with us. So it's a collective responsibility. I wouldn't go into who was right, who was wrong. What we are doing now is to make sure that the bill comes out, and then we have the legal backing for what we do. Yes, some people might have gone out of the business, but we will leave a legacy for the younger ones who are coming, so that they will not start from the zero level that we started from. So that is the situation. The bill, lack of the law regulating the practice of social work does not prevent trained social workers from doing the best they can. Does that respond to the question?
Yes, Prof. Yes, Prof. Thank you so much. Mr. Olowo, do we have any question? Our time is really fast spent, but we also have
no question
raised.
from the just praises for the presentation. No major question actually.
Okay, there's a question here by Ayo Ade. Okay. Is that the same question you want to read?
Okay.
Okay, let me read this last question. Mr. Olowo, I'm with you.
Hello. Okay, there is somebody that has been raising his hand right from the beginning, Mr. Pius Akaikeji.
Yes, let's have him, then I can read the question after. Yes, okay. Let's have him.
I will open the Pius. Mr. Pius, you have the floor. You can unmute.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen and ladies.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Yes, I sincerely want to appreciate the presenter, the Lagos State chapter, for organizing this. I'm sure it's sincerely want to appreciate one of our senior colleagues who presented on mental health. You know, mine was a contribution, or is a contribution, that mental health is a serious matter. Whether you are mentally ill or you are reading or anything, there is a tendency that everybody will have a mental health issue. I want to bring it to the perspective and all the experiences I had. A friend of mine who had gotten into so much drug addictions got haywire and was brought to the psychiatric hospital in Calabar, and he almost destroyed a computer shop. So what I was trying to say in essence is that the position of our presenter is so keen, but with all due respect, it is believed that at every point in time in our lives, we will have some level of mentally derailed issues. Therefore, her position and her presentation cannot be juxtaposed by anything. She already given us a basis. Therefore, we are all humans, and there are bound to be issues that will affect our mental health. Sir, with all due respect, people who work in psychiatric hospital had come to discover, with all due respect, that behavioral patterns does not conform in quote with that of the people who don't work in the psychiatric hospital. Looking at it from the perspective of the neuropsychiatric hospital Calabar, we should look at it from the appearances. We don't know what happened when they are treating those that are mentally derailed. We don't know the procedures they go through. But I am saying, and as a learned colleague, that in this scenario, we should look at the outcome and the behavioral patterns of those who work with mentally ill persons. Because somebody will tell you, because you work in a psychiatric hospital, you are mad. It's as simple as that. I don't know if we are together.
We are together. We
Yes,
are
we are.
listening.
Yeah.
But you,
Yeah.
sir, you
So
need to make it
what I'm
snap so
saying in
that
essence is that
you can conclude, sir.
I'm almost done. I'm
Yeah.
almost done.
Yes, sir.
So I'll beg that we should look at, particularly if we are doing current or doing subsequent papers, we should look at the behavioral patterns of social workers working in psychiatric hospital or rehabilitation centers. From there, we can be able to marry the position of our presenter with the reality of lives.
Thank you so much. That's
Thank you,
noted.
And
sir.
therefore, again, I want to quickly beg. I know that a lot of persons are listening. I had been in Zoom and YouTube throughout yesterday, but I have not been able to fill in my survey. So I'll beg the technical committee to look into that, to seeing that those that are participants in this conference feel comfortably their survey and make their contributions. Thank you. That is my
Thank you,
position.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I think Mr. Lowell has actually addressed that, and our technical team also addressing that. For those that were not able to fill yesterday, we are sorry about that. We're still trying to see what we can do. But for today's, please try to fill the form. It will be sent over and over again. Keep trying till you get that. Mr. Lowell, over to you, please.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mrs. Oyelaki. I don't think we have any much questions again. Then the next thing we have on the agenda is to make announcement for what is going to happen tomorrow. So for tomorrow, we have Dr. Chinwe Huwana, who is going to be talking about unlocking the lockables. So she's going to be presenting tomorrow, and we are also tomorrow we are going to have a panel discussion from our veterans practitioners that have practiced over the year. They are going to discuss about their experience in social work, what we are going to be looking at going forward in social work practice. So tomorrow we are going to have Mr. Olalekan Adeleke. He's a medical social worker from the University College Hospital, Ibadan. We are also going to have Mrs. Anne Omotosho. She's a retired social worker. I can't even mention what her specialty, because she's an all-rounder. She's a mother to us. She has worked in the medical social work section. She has worked in the social welfare. She has worked in the family welfare. She has worked all around. And she's a former president of the of AMSON, Association of Medical Association of Social Workers. So we are going to be having her tomorrow. And we are also going to have Mrs. Oluwatoni Adeleke. She is a community social worker from Kwara State, from Ilorin, Kwara State. So we are going to have a panel discussion. It's basically it's going to be an interactive discussion. So that's what we are going to be having tomorrow. First, the presentation by Dr. Chinwe Nwana and the interactive discussion with our panelists. So we thank everybody for listening, for joining us, and we really appreciate your effort. We really appreciate your time, the time you spend in staying with us. We really appreciate it. We also appreciate our people from YouTube. They have always been lively. They are sending messages. We are seeing your message. We really appreciate you. We thank you. We can't thank you enough. Thank you so much, everyone. I think with this, maybe I can hand over to Mrs. Ogedengbe to give our opening closing remarks, if possible. Yeah, Mrs. Ogedengbe, should be.
On behalf of everybody, the National ESCO, the Lagos State team, and the planning committee specifically, we say thank you for coming on board today. We hope to see you tomorrow for the third day running, and that will be the icing on the cake. So we hope to see you early tomorrow to listen to the practical aspect of social work. We have talked about papers. We have heard about the theory parts. Tomorrow we want to talk about the practical aspect of social work. We want those that have been in the practice for over 20, 30, 40 years to tell us how they navigate this profession and what are the prospects for the upcoming ones. Thank you so much and have a nice evening.